Hi, I'm Jack Gately from Jack Gately Real Estate and owner of the All Online Real Estate Academy and the Cape Cod Online Real Estate Academy. So just a quick walkthrough of Massachusetts Association of Realtors Form 503. It is the standard residential purchase and sale agreement. So you're going to be using this, for instance, when selling a single family home. This is going to be drafted originally by the listing agent in almost every case. So it will solidify and advance the transaction after the offer is done, and usually simultaneously or slightly thereafter the home inspection is done. So right in that time slot there, after the home inspection, before the appraisal, right in that time slot right there, obviously an incredibly important step. If you don't know how to access this form, then you might want to check my other video on this exact same YouTube channel, Getting Started with Zip Forms, because that's what we're using to access this form. That is Zip Forms. So check that out at this particular channel, Getting Started with Getting Started with Zip Forms. So standard residential purchase and sale agreement, you're just going to throw the date up there at the top of the page. That's pretty easy. You're going to list the name of the seller and list the name of the buyer. Now, that's all pretty easy. By the way, pretty darn helpful if you have your offer printed out in front of you or on the screen, because there might be occasionally where you're going to want to copy things right into this form from the offer. So a description of the premises, that should most certainly include the street address. I also like to include the lot number, which you can get from the assessor's field card. Now, if you're the listing agent, you probably got a copy of the assessor's field card before you even posted the listing. Many of you can access it right from the MLS by hitting the public record button. Some of you need to go on the internet and find it from your town website, and some of you maybe even have to drive down to the town hall. But you should have your assessor's field card, and that will include the lot number that the town uses to identify the property. So you really should be using at least three things here: the street address, the lot number, and then the book and page number, which is how the Registry of Deeds refers to the property. So that should also be on the assessor's field card. So you're going to fill in this information here. You're probably going to click that a copy of the certificate is not attached in most cases. And then down here, where we have things that are included or excluded, remember that is a very important thing to get right. You want to get this right so there's no headaches at the very end of the transaction, especially at the walkthrough. If the buyer is supposed to get that chandelier, and the chandelier is now missing because the seller took it with them, that could be a real problem. So you want to make sure that these inclusions and exclusions are as everyone expected. This is probably where you're going to copy and paste the language directly from the offer and or the listing right into here. So if you're excluding the dining room light fixture, the chandelier, you want to put it right in this line here. Get that there, so everyone knows that the seller will be taking the dining room light fixture with them. So just make sure you don't want to screw that up. That could be a real headache later on. Purchase price, that's pretty straightforward. Let's just make it $300,000 in this particular case. There we go. What was paid at the deposit, we'll call it $1,000 at the offer. I think we added an extra zero there. Let's delete one of those zeros. There we go. That's better. Paid with this agreement, let's just say that at the purchase and sale, we're going to pay in another $9,000. To be paid at a later date, that's somewhat unusual. You might want to just write none. Paid at the time of performance, this of course would be $290,000. There we go. So this number here from line 3, the total purchase price should add up on the total line item. So 1,000, 9,000, and $290,000. Fairly straightforward. You name the brokerage here, the listing agent. In many cases, doesn't have to be the listing agency, but almost always is. It could be the attorney for the seller. Highly likely it's going to be the listing agent, C. It could be the attorney for the seller. It could also be technically anyone that the buyer and seller agree to, but almost always it's the listing agency. Moving on here, scrolling here, we have the time of performance. Of course, incredibly important. This is when you're going to close. And for me, I like to usually pick 10 a.m. That's kind of just how I like to do it. You have your walkthrough at 9 a.m. and you close at 10 a.m. I don't like to close later in the day, 3 or 4 o'clock. If there's something wrong or it's hugely busy at the registry of deeds, then you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball. I like to close in the morning, and then everyone can start to moving in, blah, blah, blah. If there's a domino transaction involved, other transactions can happen. So I usually try to pick first thing in the morning. And of course, then you just put in your county where you're going to close in here. Boom, don't get that wrong. You want to close at the proper county. In case so there's any worry about where we're closing, it says right there. This is for additional disclosures. I just recently did one where we just mentioned that there was a view easement involved. So for the most times, you're going to leave this and write none. But occasionally you're going to have actually something that you're going to write in there. Not very often. Then down to section 14, you're going to write in the gross commission that is due. And remember, that's the total commission paid by the seller. Then you're going to write in the name of the listing agency, because technically the seller pays the entire commission to the listing agency. It's an important nuance to understand. The listing agency technically receives the entire commission. Then on the next page, scrolling here a little bit, sorry about that, you're going to write the name of the other agency that's involved. We'll just call it, Bob's agency. So whoever represents the buyer, you're going to put the buyer's agency name here, and then once again you're going to put the name of the list agency here. Very straightforward. Because if you read the words here, it says here, the buyer and seller understand that Bob's agency, a real estate broker, is seeking a fee from Jack Gately Real Estate, LLC, who is the listing agency. And usually going to say it that the Bob is getting this commission from Jack Gately because they're the buyer's agent in most cases. Moving on to section 16. 16 is all about the buyer's obligation to get financing. In many cases, you're just going to copy and paste the information that was in the offer over to here. So the total amount that they're seeking for financing, the deadline for the financing, and the deadline for them to apply. All pretty straightforward. In many cases, you're just going to copy that information over from the offer itself. Section 17, in a lot of cases, this inspection survey window has already expired, usually 3 or 4 days before you're actually going to complete this agreement. And so in many cases here, you're going to delete this. In further provisions later on, you're going to say section 17 is hereby deleted. In any case, I usually write 0 days and non-applicable. And then later in the additional provisions, I also mention that section 17 is hereby deleted. Because usually the inspection window has closed by the time you're getting to the purchase and sale deadline. Lead paint, this is all kind of the language that everyone's accepted, and that's one of the benefits of using a realtor form, is that it provides effectively a liquidity so that everyone is using the same forms and pretty much everyone knows what all this fine print is. You as the agent really just have to fill in the blanks. Warranties and representations. If there's a septic system, you have to answer these questions appropriately. That's pretty straightforward. Whether there is or there is not a septic system, pretty straight up on that. And then in most cases, there will be some exceptions, but in most cases, you're going to say there are no additional warranties involved. Then just write in the full address of the buyer and tenant further down in section 21 and 22. You know, in an offer, it's occasionally acceptable to write the seller's name as owner of record, but that is not acceptable in a purchase and sale. So when you're getting down here to section 21 and 22, you definitely want to get the official name of the seller. Again, you can find that on the assessor's field card. That thing comes in handy time and time again. I know at my town hall, I tend to go get it, even though I can get it on the internet as part of my MLS. I almost always, when I get a listing, go to the town hall and get the extended one. It's a whole $1 at the Plymouth Town Hall, so I almost always get one there. Additional provisions. This might be where you write, section 17 is hereby deleted and waived, plus anything else that you haven't figured out yet. And there could be a lot of different things. You know how it is. If you're an experienced real estate agent, there could be a couple of things in here that you might want to throw in a sentence here or two. Don't get too wordy as an agent because, of course, you cannot draft a contract from scratch. That would be considered the practice of law. So, a minor sentence or two here to customize the overall transaction is acceptable. Highly likely your client's going to have an attorney anyways, is going to review all of this. It might also just simply be see addendum A. It could be something very, very brief here in this additional provisions, or see addendum A, B, and C, or whatever, but usually have something in there. If you have nothing in there, then write the word none, which is what we're going to do in our version here. We're going to write the word none. You don't want to leave it blank. And then at that point, it's just a matter of throwing down the dates here. Very, very important. And don't forget to name the listing agency over here again, or the escrow agent, I should say, which is almost always the listing agency. And then let's see, page 7, that completes that. Hey, we're all done. That's it. Now, as the listing agent, highly likely you're going to be the first person that drafts this. And then you should send it over to the agent representing the buyer. And with a quick reminder that, there's a deadline coming up to get it done and whatnot. Highly likely the buyer side is going to respond with maybe some changes to the details that are written here, but even more so, they're going to respond with an addendum in many cases. Not every case, but often. The days of just using the stock standard and purchase and sale agreement are, fading away. And a lot of buyers' attorneys add an addendum, and therefore that's actually prompted a lot of sellers who in the past have not necessarily got an attorney. Now they get an attorney so that they can interpret the addendum that the buyer's attorney is using. And that's just kind of the state of things today. I'm sure that will become or will evolve over time. But it seems that sellers who have not necessarily needed an attorney in the past or not necessarily got an attorney, they now feel compelled to get an attorney. And of course, you should always remember as a real estate agent that you cannot discourage anyone from seeking legal advice. You are prohibited from discouraging anybody. You do not need to recommend an attorney, but I always do. I always recommend my clients get an attorney, but you most certainly cannot discourage anyone from seeking legal advice. So that's the standard Form 503 from the Massachusetts Association of Realtors. Pretty straightforward. Highly likely in the first several of these, you're going to have to run that by your broker. Every agency is going to be different. And most certainly it's going to be reviewed by the other broker, the other agent, and highly likely their attorney. Hey, my name's Jack Gately from Jack Gately Real Estate, and the All Online Real Estate Academy and the Cape Cod Online Real Estate Academy. Have a great day. Bye-bye.